Hey, okay. I sound much more godlike now. Okay, that's good. All right, so yeah, talk is modeling the App Store with iTunes and, or modeling the App Store and iTunes with Ember Data. It's an incredibly long title for a talk, and yeah. So, who I am. I was a Rails developer for many years, like probably most people who started in web development in the last 5-6 years. And I was quite productive with Ruby on Rails, was able to make lots of good apps that were functional and did the whole CRUD thing very easily. And I was happy with that way of working, kind of dabbled a little bit in Sinatra, and that was how I built apps. Later, kind of became a backbone developer, as a lot of people did, when that became the technology that let me do things that I could not do with Rails, like structure my JavaScript code. I definitely remember Googling around looking for a way to structure JavaScript code and finding, just write a jQuery plugin, and that's structuring JavaScript code. And I wanted something a little bit more, and thankfully Backbone gave it to me, and I built a large Backbone app, and that's why I really loved Ember when I first saw it back in July 2012. I pulled this off the Wayback Machine, and it's also the same documentation I've been referencing while I've been building the entire app. So it's been great, and yeah, I really like the big download buttons with the rounded, it's Web 2.0. So I'm now an Ember developer, and that's all I do is Ember development if I can do it. I don't really pitch any other options to people because that's where I'm the most productive. I can churn out prototypes in hours, not days, and the code makes more sense. You're writing more direct to the UI, as you all know, and it's a wonderful way to write applications. Over making, I don't know, in the last year, probably about last year since today of 2013, I've probably written about 20 or 30 Ember applications, and you can call an Ember app, a single component on the screen that switches between two tabs, but I've written things that small and larger, and doing so, I ended up making this framework, Tapas with Ember, and it's a skeleton for Brunch, and Brunch is a build tool for JavaScript and CSS preprocessors and all sorts of other things. Brunch is a really good tool because it's been around for a long time, has a lot of community support, and it's super fast, and so I use it for everything. I use it with my Vim workflow. I have a special plugin that lets me create files in the right directories. And starting so many brand new Ember apps, you kind of want to roll up these concepts into something. And I've been using Tapas with Ember while I've been building the thing I'm going to show you guys today. So when I hand out a card to people, it's that I create with Ember. And I like having that conversation with people about what it is Ember does for you, or why do I even care? Because most people are like, well, why would you put a technology on a business card? You're just going to scare people. But I think that conversation is a really good one to have because I think people get it. It's weird when you go to an app and you click on a tab that's obviously part of the sub-navigation and the whole page refreshes. It's just, it feels broken. It's like there's something wrong with this, or why isn't the data live when I switch to things? And it's going to feel broken very soon to even regular users. So I'm going to tell you a story. It starts in August 2013. And I was sitting around and I had this brand new app that I really like called Launch Center Pro. And Launch Center Pro is an iPhone app that lets you make shortcuts to make everyday actions lightning quick. And that's definitely the business speak way of saying you can just pop it open and it always works the way you expect it to. You get to the main screen of actions, you choose one, you're off and running. And that's an awesome thing to have on a device that you pull out of your pocket hundreds of times a day. And so I wanted one specific thing that I do all the time, which is try other people's software by searching the App Store. So you pop open Launch Center, you start up with their new action for searching the App Store on your phone because you don't want to have to go into the App Store app and wait for it to load and try to find the search button and then clear out your previous search that's still there because everything saves state. So what you do is you start up Launch Center Pro, you click App Store search, you type in your search, which I always am searching for Angry Birds just to make sure nothing new has come out that I've missed out on. And this happens every single time. And you see it got my search in there, so it's really teasing me that something might have worked. It certainly seems like iTunes or the App Store app knows what's going on. I'm going to try it one more time just to be sure. And I recorded this video last night, so this isn't like it's something that is not still happening. So, and just to prove that this is actually a live internet connection, I'm not just like breaking this on purpose. Let's go ahead and do the real search. Hey, look, autocomplete. It certainly looks like it's going to do something this time. And results. So that's kind of the experience if you want a shortcut search on the App Store. And I'm like, that is so crappy. Like, why can't I just pop open that search and make it work? So I started to think about it, and I was like, I might be able to solve this problem myself. Well, I first started looking to see if there were other solutions, and there weren't any. And I started to think about what the experience is like to be shared something from the App Store. And I feel like this is kind of the feeling you get. It's like, oh, I love that, you know. Or when you see the result in Google and you know exactly what's going to happen when you click that link, is you're going to get to dismiss that nice dialogue every single time. And what does that checkbox do? And does that mean I can never, ever open an app again? Yeah. And then, inevitably, you get this guy who's very happy to, hey, I'd love to sync your devices, do something, like, you know, anything. Like, it's, like, sucks, and it's terrible, and it's, you know, obviously the thing that Ember is great at. And so why don't we make something using those tools? And it turns out that there's like an API for iTunes, and there's like a website for ember.js. So I was like, let's do this. Let's make something better. And so 3 hours later, I got this thing. And it is exactly what it looks like. There's no like too light text you can't see. It literally just shows the app titles, and you click on it, and you get that. And it's like, OK, I've got like a thing that wraps the iTunes API. And by the way, this is ridiculously easy to do with Ember and Ember Data. You just fire it up, and you can make a wrapper around somebody else's API and run them out of business with their own API, pretty much. I mean, there are a lot of apps out there ripe for the picking of they have APIs, and they are not learning how to do things with JavaScript web application technology anytime soon. So I was like, that's it. Time to put it up on GitHub Pages, tweet about it, and get my internet dollars. And it's not going to get, you know, anything else, and that's it. And I've done that plenty of times, and it goes absolutely nowhere. And you know, it's like I use it, and 6 other people do, and I get 85 pull requests from one guy who wants to do one extra thing, and that's about it. So started to think about it, and I was like, no, this is like a lot bigger than this. And the whole URL thing is kind of important. And I started to use my own app over the next week, and I was like, man, this is really compelling to have something that's better that you can use on every single device and not worry about it popping up your little friend down there on the task or on the dock. So I thought maybe it's time to make a search engine with no server. And it's a kind of crazy concept because you usually think like search engine, you're going to have this giant, you know, server that's going to go out and index all these things and do stemming and all this complex stuff. And so it's kind of like crazy. And you can see where this is going. Because if it's madness, then we got, wait, oh, crap. Man. Yeah, well, oops. OK, so no, this is Ember. Ember makes this easy. Like, you know, you can search, you can use other people's APIs to do whatever you want. So if somebody else has done this better, then why don't we take what they've done better and use it ourselves? So that gets us to like the data model. And it's more than just apps. iTunes actually has a crap load of stuff on it, and I learned more and more about the iTunes API over the last many, many months than anybody should ever have to, especially reverse engineering it and not knowing how it all works. So there's a lot of data types, and a lot of those data types have things in common, and you want to be able to model them in their specific ways and use things like use common concepts between them so you're not constantly rewriting code, and it's not just like components. You actually need something more granular than that. So for me, it all started with the type key. Type key is an attribute that every single Ember data model gets automatically, and it's the name of the model in a string, and it's unified based on the way you've defined the model's name. So you do app.iTunes or iPhone app, and your iPhone _ app will be your type key. So I define a whole bunch of things up front, and so every single model knows a lot of things about itself, like what its route name is and what its route path is and CSS class and all these other things, which lets me do automatic things to define all these complex models and make them work within my app. And oh, just so you know, everything in this talk is in CoffeeScript because it's like fits on the slide better. That's why I'm using CoffeeScript. It's not because it's better than JavaScript for writing apps. I did look at you at that moment, I'm sorry. So you get to do things like this, link to model name, route name, and model, and that's like working code, and it will always work for every single one of my models. It will link to the correct name of the thing and the route, and I don't have to write like a custom template for every single thing and make it work, or if I reuse it everywhere. Same thing, I do it for route generation, iterate through all the models, and then create their routes dynamically. You might say, well, why didn't you just use a dynamic segment for the first part of it? Well, that's because then you'd have a dynamic segment at the front of all of your URLs that you would have to like parse everything through. And I had some issues with it, and I was like, I'd rather have the routes be defined up front. You might be able to refactor into a dynamic segment and have it work out okay, but I just feel like having a star at the front of your app is kind of weird. CSS classes, super useful because then you can just chunk those on anything such as images. There's different types of images for everything in the App Store, and I need to customize the way the CSS looks for those. And by standardizing the names of the classes, I can just write CSS and it'll inherit from those new things. If I add a new data type, its new class gets added, and I can go in and start modifying it without thinking about it. So the core model is the iTunes item, and it has a URL for its artwork, image suffix, which is like PNG, TIFF, all these other things, and price, all this stuff that's common to every single thing on the App Store. And so everything inherits from this item, and that's songs, apps, movies, all the different data types. But there's still more than that. There's still more specific complexity in different situations, and it gets pretty deep into the rabbit hole. So Mixins end up being a great tool for this. And Mixins lets you encapsulate functionality into a little tiny piece that you can include wherever you need it. And so I made Mixins for genre, because some things have genres. A lot of things do, actually. And specifically, the interesting Mixins are app and review Mixins. So the app Mixin turns a thing into an app, because Mac apps and iPhone apps and iPad apps kind of all share things, but they aren't necessarily all descendants of an app class. So that worked out well for me. The review Mixin is really interesting because that just means the thing has reviews, and by including this Mixin through my app, then the item automatically gets added to its template, the ability to view reviews. They will automatically be fetched from the separate API for reviews, which we'll get into in a second here. But it's a very powerful system where I can encapsulate it. The same exact thing exists in Rails with concerns, and it's a really great way to factor your code so that you don't have to copy and paste or put all these things in one place or try to do it in the controller or something silly. So this is kind of the breakdown of the different Mixins these things are using, because it turns out you can't get reviews for a song because there's not even a page for a single song on iTunes. You actually see the song always in the context of an album. But apps and movies have reviews, and so you can kind of see how different things are using it. There's tons of these Mixins throughout the app. Now here comes the really interesting stuff, the really Ember Data stuff, which is the adapters and serializers. So if you're not familiar with Ember Data, adapters are the bit of code that you make that's custom that lets you talk to your endpoint, whatever that is. In my case, it's a lot of different endpoints, including iTunes API, the review API, some other private APIs. And the serializers are what turn that data into the stuff that Ember Data is expecting so that it all comes in uniformly and you can use those objects cleanly. So iTunes has very promiscuous data types. What I mean by that is when you make a request to an API, you don't know what kind of data you're getting back. Like you may actually get movies back when you're asking for songs if you don't do things right or if their API is having a bad day. It really does happen that sometimes they just return different data types for the same request. And so you have to be able to handle it. You have to be able to filter them. And so what I ended up doing was making a serializer for all iTunes items into one thing. So I don't have a serializer per data type. I have one. And it combines the notion of a classifier, which I'll show you in just a second, and then it's polymorphic, so it gets back a list of things, and we figure out the types and then shove that in and say, this is actually an app based on the criteria that I've looked at. And it also supports side loading so that the things that it's loading polymorphically are already there, so when I ask for them, I don't have to make another request to the iTunes API. It's already been loaded. So the iTunes classifier looks kind of like this, and it just has these different properties that I know about based on reverse engineering the iTunes API and figuring out what they call things internally. They don't always use the same kind of identifiers to talk about data types, so you end up having to do different things like artist types, collection types, and there's tons of other idiosyncrasies with their API, but this kind of encapsulates all of them, quick lookup table, and that makes everything really easily. So I also gather results from other APIs, not just the main iTunes API. And one of them is the top charts. And the top charts come in, and they're in a completely wackadoodle different format than the regular iTunes API. But the one thing they do have is the ID, the unique identifier for that piece of data in iTunes. And so what I can do then is just load them all in as iTunes item results, is what I call them. And then I just say, give me my chart results and map by the actual result, which will then go and make a fine mini query to the iTunes API, which happily supports multiple IDs that will resolve all those IDs and will figure out what their data types are. So the end result is that I didn't have to write code that parsed the top charts into a model that worked for me. I can just take the ID and let it be a second request. Turns out it doesn't take much longer in the browser to make that whole second request, so it saved me a bunch of code. Another big part is relationships. I use tons of relationships inside the data. I map parent-child relationships for everything, albums down to songs, back to artists, even parent-child relationships that iTunes themselves doesn't expose, but that they have data for. It's real easy to do with Ember Data. And then I also map relationships from external APIs that are interesting to have with your content. So I always load YouTube videos, reviews when they're mixed in, and Rotten Tomatoes for movies. And what I do is I flag those relationships as always load. And this is not a feature of Ember Data. I've implemented this myself, but it's a really simple implementation that just looks at this flag in the serializer. If it exists, it's going to set the links attribute for that name to true. And what that means is that Ember Data will then try to fetch that no matter what. And I'm going to hook into it later to give it a dynamic URL based on the name. So the way I get YouTube video results is I need to make a query to the YouTube API. So I wait for the model to load from iTunes. I get its name using my custom logic. Maybe I filter some stuff out of the name if iTunes does weird things with the name. And then eventually I'm going to make a query. And the adapter is going to see that I had a URL that came in that wasn't a string as a remote URL. And so I just say, give me the relationship key URL name that I said in the previous slide. So you see how it says YouTube results URL? The thing was called YouTube results, and now just say the URL there. It's going to fetch it based on the custom parameters for that model, and then I'll get YouTube results for that thing. And it also lets me do stuff like jam in the media type so that you don't search for crash and get no results for the movie crash. It puts the word movie in there, and I can customize it. And I've tweaked all the results for everything so that you get relevant results for this when you're searching. So pagination is another really hard thing to do with Ember Data right now because it's not built in. And I built my own model for it called the Fetcher, and it handles all these things for me automatically. So it makes sure that I never go past a maximum result set because the different APIs, I know how many results they can possibly provide me. And I don't want to make queries past it and be a bad citizen of their API and get banned or whatever, although it still might happen. It does out-of-result detection, so if I get back less results than I asked for, I know that must be the end of the data set. And my fetcher is very specific to the fact that I am using another person's API that I have no control over. So I have to be kind of robust and handle error cases and things like that. But I do an identity map, which is a concept that Ember Data uses to keep a single copy of every single model. And I do the same thing with a fetcher, so that if you happen to back up to a previous search, the fetcher will still be the same one as the search that took place before, so your results will be instantly loaded right there. And as well, since it has a unique ID, I can do things like say, oh, you were looking at 3 pages of results, so I'm going to show you 3 pages of results, and that 4th page is still down there waiting for you preloaded in this fetcher. They're defined in the controller based on the query parameters that the person set up. So they might have said, show me movie results, and that's where it belongs. It took me a while to figure that out. I had it in the search model, and I was doing observers to switch out the data manually, and I realized, oh, wait, this belongs in the controller, and once query params moved to the controller, it made my life a lot easier. And like I said, it preloads results. So templates, this is kind of getting to the end of the technology that I used to build the tool, so you'll get to see it pretty soon. Dynamic partials. It's just what I call what I'm doing with the different views that I'm using for the iTunes items. So the page is basically a template for templates, and you can fill in the blanks however you want there. And the idea is that the model can up front say, I want a custom template for my metadata 1 section or for my metadata 2 section. That way I'm not writing a template for every single data type. I'm only customizing the pieces that I want because you want your site to feel kind of uniform when people are navigating it. So metadata 1 can be filled in with stuff, and it's very easy to write this kind of code. You just basically define a method that's template with default, and if it exists in the ember.templates, then it's there and you use it. If not, you fall back to the base one that's just a generic template. It might be empty even. And so for movies, I just define a few different templates, and now I get this customized experience where you load up the movie and you see the Rotten Tomatoes score, you see the duration, and you see the description and you're seeing the YouTube videos. That all came in from those 3 little parcels, and the page just loads up perfectly fine. The same thing happens with apps, and I actually share the logic in the Mixin so that all app types can share the same partials. And so you'll see that Angry Birds loads up and shows kind of the content there and the different genre and all that kind of information. Same thing with a Mac app that shows up, fills in its blanks, puts the icon in, and handles all that stuff. So what I built was this robust system for modeling their API, and been working on it for a really long time, and I've been using it every single day. So what do we build? We built something that's better than this, that's for sure, that you don't have to wait for. It works on all devices, and it's really fast. And it's called Find. No vowels, because it's cool, and that's the URL for it. It creates beautiful URLs with slugs in them that you can share with your friends, and loads up faster than iTunes' server-rendered pages ever could, because I don't think they know the web very well. It works on all devices, so you can access this on your Android device just as easily, and it's not going to pop open the App Store there, because there isn't one for there, but if you send it to somebody on the iPhone, it'll open up in the web browser, and they can look at it and decide if they want to look at it. It's incredibly fast. It's faster than the native App Store app. I've used it many a time, and it's definitely faster than that. And the most important thing is that it's a product search versus like a document search. So if you're looking for an app, you go to Google and you search, and you're trying to find this one specific thing that you know about, and you're looking for that rounded rectangle at the front there. And it's great for finding documents, but it's not good for finding products. And this is the idea of Find, is that you're finding the product first. You're getting there, and then I'm going to give you the relevant information about that product. Let's give you YouTube results, reviews, and anything else I can pull in about the app, so that you aren't looking through all this stuff, sifting through these URLs to something that's meaningful to you. And this is the logo for it. And I didn't forget Launch Center Pro, which was the whole point of this. So there's an integration for Launch Center Pro. And you just tap that button, and it adds to Launch Center Pro, and now you can search Find from there. And it is proudly hosted on DigitalOcean, which I have not been paid for, but will accept payment for. And that's it, Find. I can give you a demo of it now if you'd like to see it. Okay, so here it is. And so I'm going to search for Angry Birds. You're seeing I'm getting, as you type, completions there from some unknown API, and get back results pretty quickly. Those were already preloaded. I might have had them in there. And browse through them, click on an app here, and you're seeing everything load in on conference Wi-Fi pretty fast. Go look at a screenshot, come back, look at the actual website for the person who created the app, very easy and quick. Jump to their developer page on Find and see all the apps that they've ever made, and pray that conference Wi-Fi will eventually load these. Hey, it did. That's pretty awesome. And jump into another app. You're seeing loading states for everything, and it'll pop in all the data as it gets it from the different APIs it's using. But let's do one quick thing. Jump to the top charts. And you can see here that I've got the most important piece of an Ember app, which is a multiple select that changes. So top, blues, songs, and music. And there they are. So that's Find.